assignment, I think I was pretty limited in my assignments. I mean, I was with a 2.4 grad point on average. I wasn't going to go to Hawaii or Italy or anything. And then there was this one thing that was option. It was offered Fort Irwin, California, and I had no idea what that was. I asked around, nobody knew. And then I found an Armor magazine. I don't even know where it was. I found an Armor magazine had an article about the laser battles that were being done out there, and they were wearing berets. Yeah. They were replicating Soviets. And I thought, oh, that's cool. I want to wear a beret.
Welcome to the Courage Never Quits podcast, where members of the West Point class of 1986 tell their stories. I'm your host, Paul LaFontaine. My guest today is David Baum, Cullum number 42925. We'll hear about Dave's time as an infantry scout platoon leader at the National Training Center and his rise through the chaplaincy, where he wrote the still used Ranger School devotional booklet. As always, the views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not of West Point, the Army, or any government organization, most particularly the US Army Chaplain Corps. Dave Baum, welcome to the podcast.
So great to be with you today, Paul.
Now, Dave, we're old friends because we were in the company together. We've known each other since we were 19 years old. We saw each other when we were in the Army. We just saw each other like a month and a half ago. So old friends. So we have the danger we're probably going to get off into some rabbit holes today.
Yeah, your friendship means a lot to me, Paul. So this is fun to add this experience to that friendship.
So you're living near Fort Moore right now. So you're over in Georgia, just up the road here. What took you there? Why'd you settle or stay near Fort Moore, which was formerly Fort Benning?
Yeah, so retired in 2012. Thought at that time that I was going to be working in a church as a pastor, and so we came to Fort Moore, then Fort Benning area at the time, because my wife's family lives here. So that was the draw. Of course, we loved Columbus. The times that we had lived here at a couple of assignments, and but between liking the city and hanging out with the family before I thought I would then go to a church someplace throughout the United States. So we thought it was temporary, and we've been here since 12.
No kidding. Okay. So good 12 years there. That's great. And so it's got everything you need there. What is it like being a retiree near a fort? I can't even imagine that.
Yeah. I don't know what your impression is of the Columbus area or what our classmates is, but it's a great city. I mean, has a lot to offer, I think. Close enough to Atlanta when you get that big city itch, but the city's got a lot to offer. So we're happy here. I mean, don't get me wrong. We know there's a lot of cool places in this country to live, but we think it serves us well.
Talk a little bit about your daughters.
My daughters are doing well. I got a 26-year-old who's about to be married here next March. She just announced her engagement, and she's starting to be a nurse practitioner. Just a solid young woman, doing well. She does live with us right now. She had her own place or lived with some friends for a while, but she's back under roof. So we're enjoying those last couple of months before she heads out in her life. Then I got another daughter who's 23. She graduated from Covenant College, and she has a music degree. She's teaching in the public school system here in Columbus. Some really rough schools, really challenged kids coming up from some really hard backgrounds and families, and has taken to it really well. She loves the kids. Of course, she's just started out, but she's doing well as well. And she's got a serious boyfriend who's a guy that I respect. And so I'm blessed with two daughters that are doing well and seem to be connected with solid guys.
Now, talk about Marie. Now, Marie is the daughter of, many of us will know, Captain Bingham was the TAC of C4. I had one of our other classmates talk a little bit about Captain Bingham, but I cut all that out in deference to Captain Bingham. But we had a good chat about Captain Bingham. But Marie is what did then Captain Bingham talk a little bit about his career, because a lot of people know him from the day.
Yeah, so I'm real proud of my father-in-law, and my father-in-law's I'm really actually quite spoiled, Paul. Both my in-laws have been really wonderful to me. Marie's dad had been drafted during Vietnam and had served as an NCO, and then ended up going to ROTC and became an officer and had a long career, finishing up his time here at Fort Moore, helping run the post. But it's just I'm just blessed. Just encouraging and kind and forgiving. people to us. So anyway, just really thankful for them.
And he was actually a very professional officer and an example to us. We were always having a little fun, but he was a tremendous example for us. What? How did you meet Marie?
Yeah, so here we go, right? I was out at Fort Irwin and working for Colonel Bingham, then Major, and then Colonel Bingham. But I had informed the Army I was going to come off active duty, go to divinity school, and so I didn't feel too bad about dating the boss's daughter, as far as how that looks or what the ethics of that were. But met her out there, and then I went to divinity school, retired, and then came off active duty and went to divinity school.
Yeah.
We were married about 2.5 years later.
So the Major's daughter was the story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd worked the op for a while, and then got brought up to brigade staff, and so I worked with him there.
Oh, we're going to talk all about the National Training Center, because all you guys that are at the National Training Center get special treatment for this. So let's go all the way back to you're from Chicago. Let's talk about young Dave Baum. Just run us through a little bit of what was it about West Point that caught your eye?
Yeah, so my dad had served in the 82nd for 4 years. He was a specialist, and although it was only 4 years of his life, we had some things around the house. We had a parachute. We had some photos of him and dressed up in his his uniform and stuff with the 82nd Flash, and I was just intrigued by that as a very young boy, and then that sort of oriented me on a lifetime of being interested in soldiers. So became very fascinated in World War II history, movies, books, making little models and planes and things. And then when it came down to high school, where am I going to go to college? I stumbled upon a West Point catalog in a high school counselor's office, and then that was it for me. I said, "This is where I think I should be," and really didn't apply to anywhere else.
So when did you go to get a nomination, like did you go to a congressman or a senator's review? Do you remember that nomination process at all? How did that work in Chicago?
Yeah, it worked out well for me. I had Ed Derwinski. I think he ended up heading up the VA for a period of time, but he was a congressman that I worked through, and he was one of these guys who would go to other congressmen and police up all of their nominations that they didn't use. So I think he nominated like 7 or something my year. So that's probably how I got in, is taking the scraps off the table of some congressperson out in the middle of nowhere that didn't have any recommendations.
Now you're a big hockey guy. Is that the only sport you played, or did you play? We were a 3-sport threat.
Yeah, I wasn't threatening anything, but hockey was my real passion. I played soccer and baseball and football just to get letters for my jacket. My school didn't have a hockey team, so did all those sports to do that. But hockey was my passion. But you got to remember, I was from Chicago, so it wasn't the quality of hockey that enabled me to get onto the West Point team. But I love that sport, still to this day, and I was all-star quality in Chicago, but it wasn't didn't quite measure up when I tried to walk on.
Right. You get those guys from the Northeast come in there, and they those bruisers from the Northeast. And then let's talk about when you got back to the academy. Did you showed up on our day? Did you do any prep at all, or just hit it fresh?
No, I was completely lost and stayed completely lost through a number of the first years, probably all the way close to graduation. I had no background or no insight. Hadn't memorized anything, didn't know how to shine shoes. I was going in cold turkey, and it showed.
So the rest of us took the same approach. So I guess we all took the bell curve and moved it in the correct direction. You were in G2 as a plebe. Talk about plebe year a little bit. What did you do to keep sane as a plebe?
Yeah, G2. My memory is maybe not as good as some of the other folks that you've had on a podcast, some of these great stories and stuff, but I just remember those cadets in G2 being just impressive. I mean, for each of the class that were there, very sharp people. Seemed like it was pretty tough. I don't know how it stacks up with other companies, but I was just doing the best I could to survive. Had guys like Ron Anglin in my company and in my class there in G2. He was a roommate. And man, I'm thankful for guys like that just kind of took care of me, even though I probably didn't deserve it as a roommate.
Yeah. Well, I remember, so we joined up in I-3 Polar Bears as 19-year-old yearlings. And I can remember, other people that I talked to, I say, what was it like in your company? I know exactly what it was like. 'Cause I remember you sitting on the CQ desk. I remember you sitting in that corner room. How did you find? How different was G2 from I3, just from your limited perspective as a plebe to a yearling?
Yeah, I wish I had something profound to say about that. I didn't really notice much. To me, I found the upperclassmen to be I just like the product that West Point made, and so I found both the upperclassmen in G2 and in I3 to be pretty together people who treated people pretty well, had some concept of leadership, and seemed to treat each other in a professional way. So that's kind of my impression. I think part of for me was being so. I kind of consider myself pretty immature at the time. I was kind of a little bit younger than some of our classmates. I think I spent most of my time just trying to be a village idiot, kind of a class clown, but it seemed like everybody else was taking it pretty serious and doing and setting a pretty good example.
But yeah, I can tell you objectively, you were really funny because we love seeing you come down the hall because there was some nonsense going to come when Bob came through. What I asked this question because I think we like to talk about how tough it was at the academy and how difficult and wearisome it was. But what about the academy when you're there? Did you look around and say, "Hey, this is really cool that I'm here"? You'd mentioned the leadership a little bit, but talk about some of those experiences where you really had that aha moment, like that you liked it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not overstating it that Paul, for me, the first set of drum beats or whatever on our day. I mean, it just fit. It just fit with I'm firstborn. Something about maybe my personality. I really admired and seemed to I just admired and I wanted to be what they were holding forward as what they could create. This disciplined person, this person who lives for high ideals. I wanted that, and I accepted that, and I sort of yearned for that. So I didn't really fight the discipline, the military ethic, the sort of the noble principles they held forth. I think the only thing that was holding me back was just the raw sort of personal immaturity. I'm looking left and right, trying to get the affirmation of a laugh, or being silly, or getting affirmation from people more than really taking advantage of the opportunities to really just like take advantage of the different clubs and the different opportunities to excel at West Point. I think I was fooling around too much, trying to have people think I'm okay or something. I don't know.
So now you went on to become. I'm going to partly reference the future, but we're not going to go too far in the future. You became a chaplain eventually, and you're certainly a man of great spirituality. Talk a little bit about kind of how because the journey started at West Point, because I knew you then. So talk a little bit about how you became more serious about your faith.
Yeah, brother. For me, it did. The journey of kind of who I am today really started in different ways. West Point was certainly part of as far as growing as what it is to be a man and to be a person of self-discipline. But there was also, for me, a spiritual, philosophical sort of beginning. I remember at one point, I remember the name of the building, so forgive me for my memory, but is it Mahan Hall, where you could look over the edge of the building? You could drive on top and you could look over the edge and just see like 6 or 7 stories. I remember going up there one night, and I wasn't suicidal, but I remember going up on top of that building and looking off and just saying, what if I did die? Not that I was suicidal. I wasn't in danger. I wasn't like interested in killing myself, but like the thought, what if I did? What is really at stake? What is life? I mean, I was, even though I was immature in some ways, I was also thinking some of these deep thoughts of, what does it mean? What is life? What is it life? What is life for? What is religion? What is spirituality? Some of these initial questions. And I had been raised in a Christian church, but West Point provided me an opportunity to say, what do I believe? And so, that's where it started for me. I had a sister who was at my sister Susan. She was at Wheaton College at the time. She had sent me a list of books to read, and so I started working through some of those books, and at one point made it a discipline to go up to the cadet chapel and just sit in that incredibly beautiful building, with the stained glass and everything else, and just read the Bible for me. And it was just part of a journey that started there, from thinking some of those deep thoughts. And so, reading people like C.S. Lewis and some of the other authors that my sister turned me on, just had me thinking, what is life? How does this fit in? And of course, the military is just a noble profession, but there was also this beginning of focus on spiritual matters that did result eventually in coming off active duty and going to divinity school and then chaplaincy.
Now I remember that Wheaton list that your sister gave you. It was written down in blue ink. Is that right? I
Yeah,
can
what a
cut this
great
out of
memory.
his note. Then
Yeah, what a
you
great
had it
memory.
written down, and you'd show
Yes,
the
it
list
was
and say,
20,
"This is the list. I'm going to read these books."
25. I think it was 25 or 26 books, mostly C.S.
Yeah,
Lewis. Some of the other authors, like some
you
authors
should
like
show
C.S.
it. You say,
Lewis.
"This is my list." Yeah, yeah. I remember.
Yeah.
What were you studying? I mean, you were certainly studying a lot of extra. You were one of those cadets that had more books than were assigned. So, based on your sister's recommendation, which always was bemused the rest of us, what did you study as a course of study at the academy?
Yeah, so I think probably because I was fooling around too much. I did struggle with academics my time as a cadet. I graduated with 2.4. I mean, I was always failing or had a D in math. I mean, the math and science, all those numbers based courses, all the engineering courses. And I had such a passion for military history. I had a concentration in military history at West Point.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Look at that. I've known you for all these years. I didn't even know that. Okay. So a
yeah,
concentration was just a general was a general military history. So it was basically military art, but focused, right? Or more material.
yeah. Military history focus. I took every course I could in West or at World War II type things and had a little
Mhm.
Vietnam, but yeah, that was my passion academically. Not passion,
Infantry.
but
What at what point did you make the decision, or when did you know it was infantry was going to be your branch of choice?
yeah. Well, with the 2.4, some things were not really reasonable things to dream about. Um, I think, as I recall, I might have put like MP or something else on the request. But I think do we rank order what we want? I don't even remember.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, infantry.
You had to do three
That's what
choices, and then your first, second, and third choice.
I think I put MP or something first. Getting queasy about whether or not I'd be able to hang as an infantryman. But I got to tell you,
Yeah.
Paul, I'm really glad that that was my branch. It was good for me.
So graduation. What was your decision on your posting? So because you had a most unique post that you went to. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I wonder if it's the same sort of situation with what branches were available. Although I was very, very glad I got infantry, just because for me it helped me grow as a leader. I think the different opportunities that infantry provided just helped me grow as a leader and as a person. And in the same way, my assignment, I think I was pretty limited in my assignments. I mean, I was with a 2.4 grad point on average. I wasn't going to go to Hawaii or Italy or anything. And then there was this one thing that was option. It was offered Fort Irwin, California, and I had no idea what that was. I asked around, nobody knew. And then I found an Armor magazine. I don't even know where it was. I found an Armor magazine had an article about the laser battles that were being done out there, and they were wearing
Yeah.
berets. They were replicating Soviets. And I thought, oh, that's cool. I want to wear a beret. Went out there, and Paul, what a blessing that was. I mean, I say blessing. What a rewarding professional place for me as a young lieutenant to go out there and just be
Yeah.
immersed in battlefield level, battalion level operations.
Well, I mean, what's always marvelous to me is when you go back, the way our decisions were really so based on such small things. Like you said, hey, they wear berets. I want to give that a go. So people
Seriously,
talk about, I didn't go armor because I hit my head. Then somebody else says, I went armor because I hit my head. It's just,
it really
we
was.
hung
It
out
really
out
was.
there at Fort Irwin quite a bit because I was out in the 24th. I'd go out there and we'd actually connect up and we spent some time out there. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had a great experience out there. It culminated in working with Jim Nicholas as a scout platoon leader. So two of us were out there replicating
Right.
a motorized recon company, and what a blast! Jim, that experience professionally with Jim sort of was my capstone. Combat arms time. I didn't do combat as a combat arms officer, but man, just to work with Jim and be out there with our scouts out at NTC, so rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were, I mean, just, you're a very, you're self-effacing, which is a charming part of you. But you were the scout platoon leader for the Op 4, which means you took a platoon and then you moved to scouts, which scout platoon leader is usually a well-performing platoon leader. So you did a good job as you started. I'll say the words because you would never say it yourself. But you had a good run there, right? I mean, and then talk about the decision to But just talk about leaving the Army, the chaplaincy, kind of how that all worked, because I think that's
Yeah.
an interesting story.
Yeah, I honestly don't think it's self-effacing to say I was not a strong platoon leader. My situation was that I worked under a platoon sergeant, a guy named Frank Chandler, truly gifted senior NCO. I mean, he's the kind of guy that should have probably just been given some kind of battlefield commission if we did that in peacetime. So talented, and to come underneath him and to learn and grow. At a certain point, it was tough because he was so capable. There'd be times where he was leading the regiment at NTC and capably integrating all the different elements of all the combat arms, all the and so to
Right.
be under a guy like that and to try to kind of take command of the platoon, it was tough. But I have awesome respect for Frank. Although I didn't excel as a platoon leader, I do think Jim and I did a good job as scout platoon leaders, and it was just so thrilling, Paul, to be out there and to be working and providing information to control, or not to control, but to make successful the work of hundreds of vehicles and other commanders, to provide information
How
to
many
help them.
rotations did you and Jim and Mark Wolf and Jay Millen, how many rotations did you guys actually end up doing as a duty assignment?
Yeah, so they were back then. I don't know what they're running now, but we did 10 a year, and
In a
so
year.
being out there for that time. But for me, as much as I love doing that, I think your question allows me to add this. As much as I love that professional piece, at the same time that spiritual piece was still growing in me and still working. I had gone through a broken engagement. I was engaged to a woman, and that relationship broke. So I had a broken heart, and kind of navigating that, and kind of understanding, what is it to be a man and to suffer, a disappointment, and then how's my spiritual life, and really as I studied and I learned for me, and not to turn this into some kind of a preaching session or something, but as I start thinking more about if I really believe these things, heaven and hell and judgment and different things. If I really believe these things, then what should my life look like? And so I started making decisions, and my life became more and more maybe disciplined spiritually. Whereas I was a little bit late to bloom in that regard, having been raised in the church and everything, but taking my faith seriously. And with that was a sense of, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? I love being a recon platoon leader. And so therefore I love being a military leader, but you got one life, and what are you going to use it for? So for me, I found myself loving talking to soldiers about God more than I love talking to them about tactics or whatever, as much as I love that stuff. And so it seemed like the right thing to do to come off active duty, go to divinity school, and get armed and equipped for whatever God had for me.
And I visited you at Divinity School, if you recall, in your while you were there doing your studies.
Yes.
We had a short visit. You were a big cyclist at the time. It was a
Well,
small room filled with cycling kit and more of those books. Now, your sister's list had grown well beyond the 26, and that was your list. So, but at the time, you were not talking about the Army as much. So, how did it turn out that you came back to the chaplaincy? Just talk about how that all transpired.
yeah, absolutely. So, meeting Marie right at the end of my time as infantry officer, then she worked while I was in seminary, and we started our married life together while I was in divinity school. And while we were on our honeymoon, we saw the movie A Few Good Men, and I had sort of resigned myself to possibly being a missionary. I thought the infantry and going to Ranger school and all that leadership training as an infantry officer was to prepare me to be a missionary. But while we were on our honeymoon, we saw the movie together. We went and saw the movie A Few Good Men, and just that depiction of the military. I mean, I know, of course, Jack Nicholson's an abusive kind of criminal in the movie,
Yeah.
but just the noble aspects, the discipline, just brought it back. And we were walking through the mall afterwards, and I'm not a real big proponent of hearing voices, but it was as though God was impressing on my heart, go back in the Army and be a chaplain. So you love the military, you love soldiers. Here's what I want you to do. And my wife loved her time as an Army brat, all the years moving different places. She took to being an Army brat really well, and she was very eager for us to go in that direction with life after divinity school.
Yeah, for sure. What a great partner she's been in that journey, for sure. How did that work? Because you just reapply for the Army, or what is the mechanics of that? That's for those of us who don't know.
Yeah, so the Army, I think it's still in place. They had a thing called the Chaplain Candidate Program. So I was able to contact them while I was still in the inactive reserve, right? I think we had to stay in for a little bit after we. So I contacted them, say I wanted to be transferred to the Chaplain Candidate Program. And then I was able to go to the Chaplain Basic course. I was able to do a training over the summer at San Antonio. It's in San Antonio. So I was able to get training there and able to pick up some chaplain schools and training while I was in divinity school, get paid over the summer as a captain. And then as soon as I got done with divinity school, I immediately applied to come in as a chaplain. I had to have my endorsement from my church and then my theological education. And then the Army accepts you as being a fit and appropriate person that could possibly be a success with soldiers.
So does it work that like another person in divinity school at the time could have applied for the Army and gotten in the chaplaincy that way, or was the how does that work? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. So if somebody did not have, since I had all the basic training stuff type stuff satisfied, they'll take somebody straight out of divinity school, complete civilian, no background, and then they send them to a chaplain basic course where they get some basic training. That's unfortunately why you see some chaplains so weak in military skills, because it's pretty limited what they are able to pick up while they're at the chaplain basic course. I mean, they're learning to march. They're learning. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, right. All the stuff that you obviously knew from instinct. So, what was your first assignment coming out of the chaplain program in divinity school?
Yeah, so when I came back in the Army as a chaplain, the first time was at the 101st. Served with 2nd Brigade, outstanding unit. We went to Panama for 4 months, pretty soon after I got there. So a great opportunity to get to know soldiers and connect. A lot of good people there. I don't know if any of your listeners know Dave Doyle, who's still serving as a general. He was one of fellow platoon leaders. Just a lot of good people in that unit.
Now, chaplains have a certain kind of not a reputation, but a role, and they're not considered hardcore. Like if your chaplain's not up on the military skills, that's okay because he or she is the chaplain, right? How did you establish that you were not a chaplain? You were a chaplain with a Ranger tab, I guess. I guess was that would do it, I guess. But did you have to kind of go through a bit of like establishing yourself? How did that work?
Yeah, the power of the uniform, really, right? I mean, you walk in a room, they see the EIB, they see the Ranger tab, they see the airborne wings, they know your prior service, and so instant connection. So there was really no need for any verbal or anything. Just coming in humble. They see it on your uniform. Instant conversation starter. It's just such a blessing because I could so quickly establish that contact and have rapport. Of course, whatever I lost from personality or doing something stupid, is took away. But like instant connection with the folks I'm serving with, and for those that don't have that, be gentle on those chaplains because they have to build that connection and that confidence with soldiers who that they don't know that.
As a lieutenant, you had to build with your NCOs, and we all had to build it over time. But it's so you certainly have to give them a break. But I imagine when you walked in with the EIB, the airborne wings, and the Ranger tab, they were a little relieved to say, "Okay, well, this guy, we can throw him out the back of a helicopter, and he'll get there eventually."
Yeah, I mean, they still have to see if am I a cool guy, am I friendly, am I humble? But at least they had some confidence that I could live the life, I could fit in. I wasn't gonna have my white light flashing all over the place at Gerald TC or something.
So what was the most vivid memory you have of, and it doesn't have to be that particular brigade, but just as a chaplain deploying, like tell us some stories about what it's like to be a combat chaplain, or talk about that because it's such a unique perspective.
Yeah, I'd love to just share two things that come to mind if we have time. One is the fact that, or the just laying out, being transparent with your listeners, that I don't have a lot of combat time. I did go to Iraq, but I went as a brigade chaplain, and I got to tell you, Paul, it wasn't as satisfying as I had hoped it would be. I kind of wish I had gone as a battalion chaplain. As a battalion chaplain, you're the chaplain for 600 to 800 people, and those are your folks. And you can just walk in and have every right to serve and to love as the soldiers received it, right? But as a brigade chaplain, it was different. You had your head headquarters company. But that's a company with a lot of officers, a lot of senior NCOs, very, very busy folks. Not as easy to connect with, I found. Although the folks in Second Brigade of Fourth ID that I went to Iraq with were friendly to me and stuff. It just wasn't the same as being a battalion chaplain. But I had great battalion chaplains when I went to Iraq, and I loved my time. But that was the only combat experience I had. So our generation served a number of times in combat zones. Those that served long careers. I had a 22-year career with just that one time of service overseas. But as I think back to some of my chaplain times, I have to say that probably one of the most satisfying experiences I had as a chaplain was writing a devotional, a small devotional for Ranger students when I was a Ranger school chaplain. And it was fun because it was done as a team. As I mentioned, I was a fan of C.S. Lewis and because of, my sister recommending his books earlier in life. And one of the things I was always intrigued by C.S. Lewis was the fact that he valued friendship. And when he wrote, he would have his fellow, his friends give him feedback on his writing. And so when it came time to write the Ranger devotional, we called it The Way. I think it's still being given out to Ranger students, by the way. It's kind of fun that we had that as a group. We had that little bit of a legacy going on. But we did it as a group. And so although it was sort of my overall project as a senior editor, I had a team of people writing. And so this was back before, the internet made collaboration like that easy. And we were mailing stacks of pages. So we had a day for each, a devotional for each day of Ranger School. And we had 2 or 3 different people giving ideas of, hey, change this sentence, or this metaphor or whatever doesn't fit, or that's repetitious, or that sentence doesn't make sense. And it was so fun, Paul, doing it as a group, and just that collaborative writing experience.
In the group? Like who was in part of that team?
So my chaplain assistant at the time, Austin House, my sister Susan. Oh gosh, this is awful. I have it right here.
But it wasn't the soldiers. It was just a group that you pulled together to help create the devote. There it is.
Yeah. So Chaplain Paul Lashley, my sister, my wife, Lieutenant Terry Hurt. He had just graduated from Ranger School, and he was a Harvard grad. And so I said, hey, you're a smart guy. You help me write this thing. So he wrote one day, I wrote the other day, and hopefully we had enough variety in the writing voice that Ranger students would stay awake. But just a thrilling, collaborative team effort, and it's so fun that it's still being given out today.
And what does a Ranger student get one on attending the school? When they use it today? How is it used?
Yeah, so Ranger School, you don't got a lot of reading material, so there's just a small number of items that you get to that you can pick up and have to read. And to this day, they still give that out as one of the options. So there's a day for each day of Ranger School. Now, at the time, each of those days were specifically tied to the events of the course. I'm sure the course has been revised, 5-6 times. And when the devotional talks about going down the side of Mount Yonah, they're probably jumping out of a plane or something that day. But nonetheless, hopefully some of that stuff still rings true.
So you wrote it to the actual training program. You wrote it to the training program of the days.
Yeah, they were reading if they're going to go rappelling. They were reading the day before about rappelling. So hopefully we're still getting good effect, even though it's completely off the training calendar now.
How did you get to be the Ranger School chaplain? I mean, that's an unusual post. There's one Ranger School and one senior chaplain there. How did that come to be?
Yeah, for me that worked out because of having the Ranger tab. There just wasn't that many former infantry Ranger School guys that were available at the time it came open. And just really glad that it worked out that way.
In your last assignment, you were at Bliss, right? Fort Bliss?
Last assignment was at the Pentagon.
Pentagon. Talk about, what was your last assignment in the Army if you're at the Pentagon?
Yeah. So the Pentagon, wow. For those of you who've heard the Pentagon, you know what that's like. A lot of good people, a lot of important work being done, right? We all acknowledge that. We want to be politically correct as far as, or just accurate that it's an awesome place with a lot of important work being done. But for me, it was rough, Paul. I was a lieutenant colonel there on the staff, and some of the tasks there were just not thrilling and exciting. I think for about 6 months, for example, for 6 months, I was calling chaplains and asking them, had they reviewed the 26 slides at the time we were enacting the don't ask, don't tell policy. And if you remember, they were worried about the chaplains going off the reservation because of how certain chaplains viewed that change in policy. And so they wanted to make sure all the chaplains were going to toe the line. They weren't going to go on, the news and badmouth senior Army leadership. So the chaplains were to review these PowerPoint slides. And my job, the way I remember it literally was like 6 months, was calling all the chaplains, active National Guard, Reserve, whatever. Have you gone through the PowerPoint slides? And it was important work. It needed to be done. We needed to speak to the people in Congress that were asking, have the chaplains. But I just felt like what I fit best was sort of soldier level ministry and leading chapels and preaching and Bible studies. That was what really gave me joy. And so to be up there doing that kind of important but dry for me staff work, it just killed me. And I said, I got to come off active duty if this is what senior chaplaincy life is going to include. And that was sort of maybe an unfair characterization of what senior chaplains do, because there are senior chaplains that did great work staying close to soldiers, but I just felt for me it was time to go.
But you retired at 20 years, and that would just happen to be your last job, right? I mean, that's
22 years for me.
22 years, right? So that just happened to be the last one you had. So transitioning out, talk a little bit about how you took your faith forward. What are you up to now? We talked about Fort Moore already, but what direction are you headed?
Yeah, three things. I think I can answer that rather without too much words. One, came off active duty and thought I was going to be a pastor. So like I said, we came here to Fort Moore for that purpose. Interviewing with churches, looking all over the country, seemed like maybe instead I was supposed to start a church. So working with a church here in town, we worked for 3 years trying to start a church. We were aiming for the center of the target, Paul. We were aiming for the hardest pressed part of our city, the poorest part. We were hoping for a multi-ethnic church. We were going for it, and worked for 3 years on that. I loved that time. I found that just thrilling and challenging, but it also drained us. So at the end of that time, Marie and I were absolutely smoked. The church plant didn't take, so to speak, a number of different factors to including the fact that a bunch of our team all moved from the city at the same time. But we were spent, and as it turned out, I had a couple of years where I just needed to recover. And so there was a couple of years where I was just healing up. And now at the time I was looking for work, but I see now, I think God was just letting me get my feet back underneath me. In time, I came to, actually it was right around COVID. I came to start working at Mercy Meta. My T-shirt, I think, should be visible to your viewers. But it's a Christian medical clinic here in town. Friend of a friend, or a friend of a friend from church started this, and I'm a chaplain there now. I've been serving there for 4 years. Love my time there. I lead a mental health support group. I do individual counseling, and then we have a very capable licensed social worker, but she works half the week. So I help out with people who don't have food, a place to stay, they're homeless or whatever. So I help out with social services type of things as the third part of my job, doing mental health support, everything from anxiety to schizophrenia, individual counseling, and then the social services. And then the third thing that's going on in my life right now that's still present, along with Mercy Med, the third thing I wanted to mention is we also serve as the area coordinator for Officer Christian Fellowship. Some of our listeners are familiar with that, Christian Bible studies for those in uniform. So I think we're averaging around 10 young Army officers in our home right now. Right now we have mostly lieutenants, but it's been rewarding to do a weekly Bible study for them and just invest in them. And it's been wonderful because haven't had much connection with the military since coming off active duty, and now to have sort of that connection again and hear what it's like and to try to serve them best I can. And Marie loves it too, so it's a great thing to do together.
Joint venture, right? The two of you.
Yeah, Yeah, she loves it, and of course they take to her as a kind of a mom away from home kind of thing. She really fits that role. She does great.
That's great. I'm going to change the format of this little question because you're a thinker, you're a reader, you're a thoughtful guy. So you can pick any time in your life to apply the advice that you would give yourself. So I usually frame it as a 20-year thing, but go back to any time in your life and say, when I was this age, I would have told myself X. Like if you had one shot, a magical time machine that was going to let you give yourself advice in the past, which age would it be and what would the advice be?
Yeah, I appreciate that, because as I've heard you ask that question 20 years, I needed this advice far earlier. And my advice isn't some of the great advice some of our classmates have given. I think some of the advice has been outstanding as far as value friendship or just be a little kinder or whatever. Those are great for me. And I think I alluded to it maybe in one of your other questions. I needed to hear, and I think I still need to hear, the advice to not be too concerned what other people think. I think, being respectful, I'm not talking about being rude or obnoxious or disrespectful, but I think for me, there's been a need to, maybe it's insecurity. I don't know what it is in me, but just like constantly seeking somebody else's approval. And so I work on that now. How do you love and serve, but do it from a healthy sense of self that doesn't need their approval? You can love and serve so much, I think, in a higher quality manner when you're not attending to yourself. And so that's the sort of the self-counseling that I do to myself. I do 11 hours of counseling a week, but I probably need that many hours just reminding myself that, these people aren't there to feed my sense of self worth or need. They're just there to be loved and served. So anyway, I don't know if that's I don't know if that gets to what your question is, but that's sort of something I'm constantly working on, and I needed to hear that as a lieutenant.
Okay, well, I got you on here. We get a special bonus round for you. Your sister's 26 books, all written in blue ink. And then you've added to that, if you could write the perfect book to summarize them or take the perfect position, what book would you write?
Yeah, you know what? I'm actually trying to write a book right now, and it's on how we grow in our relationship with God. So for me, I think people should think about the different relationships they have. And so the book that hopefully will come out someday, will talk about how God uses different relationships, uses friends, like our friendship. I know God's used my friendship with you, Paul. God uses church leadership. God uses the family. God uses people in the workplace. And so thinking in terms of how to grow as a person to include our spiritual life, but also be mindful of how God uses other people. And again, they're not to be used, but they're to be appreciated as having something to offer us as we grow to be the kind of people we want to be. So that's it's been bouncing around in my head for a number of years, and maybe someday, because of the inspiration of people like you, I'll follow through and actually write. So I got these 9 different relationships that I think that we all have, and God uses them in different ways.
Well, I think if we grow this podcast where it's as big as some of the big podcasts in the world, we can launch your book on this, and then we'll both achieve some level of.
I love it. But thanks for doing this. I know a lot of us would just want to make sure you get that loud and clear. Thanks for doing this. I have absolutely loved learning about my classmates. It has been so, I don't know these people, but I hope someday, some way, some of them I could have more than just the podcast from them, because it's just been really rewarding getting to know them a little bit. And so I look forward to how God's going to use these podcasts, even in my life, as far as friendships with some of these folks that to this date I haven't met yet.
But Dave, thanks so much for being on the podcast. It's been really great to have you on.
It's been great, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Courage Never Quits podcast, where any member of the class of 1986 who is willing to tell their story will be a guest. To get the word out and to stay up to date on the latest episodes, hit the like and subscribe buttons. With 954 living graduates in the class, we have a lot of stories to collect, and you don't want to miss any of them. We'll see you in the next episode.